Well, hey everybody, we are on week 3 of our Sunday series called Focus, where we're looking at the book of Colossians and walking through. So far, you guys are killing it when it comes to leading your groups. I've heard nothing but good things from many of our students, and so I just want to say thank you. Thank you for being faithful and coming both of these last weeks and committing to being with us and helping invest and disciple. Just as a reminder, part of our strategy, the way that we're trying to make disciples, is we see that we want to get students involved on Wednesdays. That's kind of our open door, our front door. But where the real discipleship, where the real growth is going to occur is in small groups during those discussions. And so I just want to encourage you, hey, maybe you feel like, I'm not sure if my group is really discussing a whole lot. Now, I'm just saying, based on yesterday, y'all are doing a good job on the discussion because we're getting a little loud. That's okay. I'm okay with that. But maybe if you feel like, hey, I'm not sure if my group is discussing, you're building those relationships. And I would encourage you, keep building those relationships. But this week, we're going to be talking about Jesus Rules, Part 2. We're still in Colossians 1. We will get to the rest of the book. But we're looking primarily at the issue of Jesus reconciling us to God. And that word reconcile is going to be a key word for the lesson. And so you want to have a good working understanding of that. But basically, it's that idea of, hey, we were far from God, we were enemies of God, and now we can be friends of God. We can be brought back into God's family. We've been reconciled through the blood of the cross. And so as you look over the lesson, I just want to encourage you again. It's broken up into 5 parts. The first part is for you. Hopefully by now you're kind of familiar with the Bible background and the fact that Paul wrote this and why he was writing it to the church at Colossae, because they were so confused with all these different ideas going on. But I want to draw your attention to the main point. The main point I underline in Colossians 1, 21 through 22 says that you want to help the students understand the bleakness of what it means to be separated from God, and rather the gloriousness of what it means to be reconciled to Him through Christ. And so that's what we're trying to do. I want to help you understand how bleak, how grim, how terrible our sin is, and how amazing it is to be reconciled to God. And I'm just being honest, as I'm reading through this morning, it was encouragement to me just to remember, like, it's not about whether or not I'm the world's best pastor. It's not about whether or not I do all the right things. It's the fact that God has lovingly forgiven me of my sin through the cross. And because of the cross, I can have peace, regardless of the fact that, I'm going to mess up. I'm going to do stupid stuff. I'm going to say things I'm going to wish I didn't say. That's me. I'm Peter. But I have grace and forgiveness at the foot of the cross. And so that's what you're helping them wrestle with. So the second part of the lesson, the lead in, the beginning, once again, it's going to ask you to do a video. And so one of the things I did think that was good was they asked, hey, can you have your students summarize the first 2 lessons? I think that's a good way to maybe kind of open things up when it comes to the lesson. I still think, hey, have a game. I use charades as a good game. If you have a game from home, I have packs of Uno cards and Phase 10. I think just playing games, building those relationships, continuing to get to know names is so important. Continue to build those relationships. Ask, how's the week going? What do they like about school? What do they not like about school? Build those relationships. But then explain, kind of wrap up that introductory time. Hey, we're going to be looking at the focus of our lives and how we can have our relationship with God restored. And so I thought, moving on to the third portion, the main event, the teaching portion, a really good thing was kind of opening up in the student guide. It's going to give them 2 groups of words and have them kind of decide where the words go. You can have them physically write these down. You can verbally talk through this. Another thing that I'm thinking is maybe like write the words out in advance on cards and kind of put them together and say, hey, I need you to split this group of words into 2 groups based on which words seem to go together. And those words are alienated, hostile, evil, holy, blameless, and above reproach. Obviously, one's going to be the wicked side, one's going to be the righteous side. And then you're just going to walk through a couple of questions. I thought these were really good, where you read the word, you ask them what comes to mind, really talk about the significance of each word. What comes to mind when you think of the word hostile? What comes to mind when you think of the word alienated? Why would it say that? And then which is positive, which is negative? And then you're going to turn, after reading the passage in Colossians 1, 19 through 23, really dive into what does it mean to be God's enemy? And explaining that it's not just about the fact that some people do really bad things, like Jeffrey Epstein and people who murder and kill and it's not just about these terrible, terrible, awful people. We all are enemies. Even the little things. The little things cause us to be an enemy. Not just like, not quite God, but actually full on, full slot enemy. And so you want to dive into that. And it really comes down to the issue of the heart, because as it says, we're selfish, we're selfishly motivated, and our goals and desires are at odds with God's. And so you're really helping them understand the enemy portion, but then you also want to jump into the idea of the redemption, the reconciliation. So having someone reread Colossians 1:19 through 20, it's going to bring up this issue of the gap. And I'm not sure if you've seen this illustration before, but almost like there's two mountains, right? Or two cliffs. And on this side is man, on this side is God. And there's a big drop in the middle, and nothing can span those unless you put a cross in the middle. The cross becomes the bridge that man can go from the mountain of sin over to the mountain of God through the cross. And so a good question is the last question on the lesson 3. This is lesson 3. It's the last question. It says, what do you have to do to actually accept Christ's payment for your sins? So I'm going to challenge specifically our high school groups. Here's where I think the majority of your conversation should come in, because this is going to come down to, can we articulate what we believe about the gospel, and can we articulate what needs to occur in order for a person to go from unregenerate, unrepentant, far from God, to receiving Christ's work, becoming a Christian, be getting saved. Okay, to use those church terms. What does a person need to do to get saved? What is their responsibility? What is God's responsibility? And so I think as a group, first off, have your group kind of talk through it. Like, how would this work? How would you explain it? How does this come about? And in the bonus round, I think there's a really good activity I would encourage everyone to do based on Ephesians 2, 8 through 10, and kind of writing out those words, like by grace, through faith, not of your own doing, gift of God, not the result of works, so that no one can boast. And then explaining and think about each one of those. Like, this is, when we say a person needs to give their life to Christ, this is the order, this is the steps that they do. It's understanding it's by God's grace. What is grace? It's unmerited favor that he gives to us. It's through faith. So faith is our part, grace is God's part, not of our own doing. Okay, wait a second, I thought it is of my own doing. Well, it's not, because it's grace. God does all the work of the salvation part, but it's my job to have faith. And faith isn't necessarily something I do. Faith is something I just choose to place my faith, my trust in. And so kind of helping them work through that. And if you have any questions, please reach out to me. I'd love to dialogue with you better about, hey, how do you explain this in a helpful way? But I think the bonus round opportunity, and then even the very last section of the lesson is really, really good. Specifically, it says, ask students if they think it's true that media loves a good story about someone famous hitting rock bottom, and then encouraging them to ask them, answer the question, what are some stories you guys know of where someone hit rock bottom, and then do they come back, do they not? And just in light of right now cancel culture, some people would say, hey, no, they get canceled and they're never coming back from that. And that's a good conversation. Like, okay, if the culture cancels this person and now they seemingly can't come back, what is Jesus' response to that person? How could that person come back to Jesus? Or movies, music, their own personal stories. Like, what's it like when you hit rock bottom? And what you're really trying to draw out is when you hit rock bottom, the only thing that can shift is your perspective, right? Your circumstances won't necessarily change, but your perspective can change. And as your perspective changes, all of a sudden you begin thinking through things differently and in a better way. And so the last question is, what are some practical ways that this type of perspective on our own sin and God's grace can help serve as a motivation to love, follow, and obey Christ? Something I love is this quote by Tim Keller. It's in the lesson. It says, the more you see your own flaws and sins, the more precious, electrifying, and amazing God's grace appears to you. So that's what we're doing this week, is we're helping our students see how terrible their sin is, how amazing God's grace is, and that he's reconciled us to him. That's how we can know him, is that he reached out to us. It wasn't us reaching out to him. We had to hit rock bottom in order to see that our need for Christ. And so I'm excited. I think this is going to open up some really good conversations. I think specifically the conversation about, like, so what does it even look like for a person to be saved? How would you explain that? I think this is so good for our students to be able to move beyond just, okay, when I'm sitting in church, the right answer is Jesus, right? But actually moving to articulating the things that they believe. And as they articulate those, they'll better understand those. And the better they understand it, the better they're going to have a chance at being able to explain that to someone else. And so that's what we're doing. We're equipping, we're growing disciples. And one of the things about growing disciples is equipping them with the ability to share their faith with somebody else. And so I'm challenging you guys with that. Just a reminder, reach out to your students this week. This is the last week to be able to do Operation Christmas Child. They can take a box on Sunday, take it home, pack it, bring it back the following Wednesday. And so I just want to challenge you guys with that. I want to challenge you guys each day, spend a little bit of time with God, get to know God yourself through the reading of his word, through talking to him, sharing the things that are on your heart, share the burdens, share the joys, share everything. Pray to God and invite him into interacting with your life. And if there's any way I can be praying with you guys specifically, please let me know. I would love to do that. And so I hope you guys have an awesome week, and I will see you again Sunday.